Welcome to Build a Business Worth Buying, the podcast where seasoned entrepreneurs, M&A experts, and world-class operators share behind-the-scenes stories of building, scaling, and selling remarkable businesses. I'm your host, Aaron Allpeter, and every week I sit down with people shaping the world of acquisitions, founders who've cashed out, buyers with bold strategies, and advisors who help make deals happen. This is not a podcast for beginners. It's for those who know the grind and want actionable insights to make their next big move. Get ready to take notes, rethink your strategy, and hear untold stories of what it takes to build a business worth buying. Welcome back, everybody. We've got a really exciting episode today. Someone that I've known for a long time, Alex Yancher is here. Alex, good to have you. How you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Always, always. So in case you don't know Alex, he is the co-founder and CEO of Passport Global. They are an end-to-end internationalization solution, and they're focused on making cross-border e-commerce simple. They recently announced an acquisition of Brand Access, which we're going to dig into. And what Brand Access does is helps brands handle compliance for international expansion. So if you're trying to test, you're not quite sure, do I want to sell in Morocco? Brand Access can help you set up the entities, be compliant as you do that. Prior to founding Passport, Alex was the co-founder and CEO of Lynx, a cross-border e-commerce personal shopping service that helped people buy products abroad from the US. And he's also the co-founder of Pantry, which was acquired by Byte Foods in 2016. So I'm really excited for this. I've known Alex for a long time, and I had no idea you had all this experience, not only from selling a company and then now buying a company. And so just really excited for all of this. So thank you for being here again.
Thanks, Aaron.
Cool. So let's just kind of dive right back in. When it comes to your resume, one thing that pops out is just cross-border e-commerce. Why has this been the thing that has always drawn you?
You know, cross-border e-commerce is really complicated, which is what makes it really interesting to me. There's over 200 countries. Every country has its own idiosyncratic rules and regulations about how they handle imports and taxes and what the thresholds are. And moreover, it's an ever-changing set of rules and regulations. And big ones too. Like before I started Passport, the UK did not have this rule where every business in the US has to register with HMRC to get a VAT ID number. That was a thing that happened 3 years after I started Passport. So something so dynamic, so interesting, really tells me that it has potential of being a great startup idea, at least conceptually speaking, because you could kind of know for sure that the incumbents almost definitionally aren't able to handle the new set of rules and regulations because they just happen. And these are businesses that don't move fast. They can't adjust to new market requirements and conditions very quickly. They could adjust over time, of course, but very quickly they can't.
So was it something where your kind of end was always being faster than the incumbents? Was that the idea is that, regulation changes and 2 weeks later you've adapted to it? Was that kind of the idea behind Passport?
Yeah, I thought, if all else fails, I want to compete on other things as well, not just that. But if all else fails, I could really hang my hat on I'm definitely going to be faster at having a good answer for the market around this big tectonic shift that just happened.
Makes sense. And so you mentioned a couple things that changed with the UK VAT piece. What else has changed since you started Passport? Has it always been an up and to the right sort of story?
A lot has changed. A lot has changed, really, and it continues to change. So I think about cross-border e-commerce as a set of waves. So the first wave was e-commerce is just beginning, Shopify is just beginning, and you might be getting a trickle of orders from Canada, UK, China even, and you don't want to lose out on this revenue. And people just want to start figuring out how to ship to these countries easily. They don't want to deal with anything. They don't need to optimize. There's nothing to optimize. You're getting like a trickle of orders.
Just get it
You
done.
just want to fulfill that order. So that first wave is DDU, deliver duties unpaid. And you're basically using the post office. literally physically going into a post office. Hey, what do I do with this box? I got an order. They'll walk you through it. You don't need to pay any duties and taxes. It's not up to you to pay it. It's delivered duties unpaid. Second wave was DDP, delivered duties paid, and you started to have to get some software in your shopping cart to calculate duties and taxes. And that's the wave that I would say we joined the market, and we grew really, really quickly. And then real strong competitive pressures started to hit us because we were onto our third wave, which was full end-to-end internationalization. And that's where there is something to optimize. And the world of direct to consumer really blew up. But we were like squarely in the middle of this market. We have such a great engineering product team, operations team. And we thought, why not us? Why can't we be the leader in this space actually? And really catch this wave as it's going up, as we see it coming, and be the number one internationalization provider, end to end. Help with everything from your front end to regulatory compliance to all of that. So that was the third wave. That was a tough period for us. So to your question of like,
Yeah.
was it all up and to the right? Not really. That was a really tough period for us because it was new for us. It was more complicated value props and software, and it trickled all across our company, from customer success managers who had to support a fairly simple solution. And then now I would say we're onto the fourth wave, which is some of these brands have optimized and they've gone so big that they're actually hitting that scale where it makes sense for them to set up local operations in UK and Canada and really dramatically bring down the cost of shipping. And it's so obvious, why doesn't everybody do it? Well, it's super hard. It's super complicated. So that's where brand access comes into play.
We're going to dig into the brand access deal a little bit more. That's super fascinating. So I definitely agree with those four waves. So you were part of Pantry, and can you just give a quick summary of what Pantry is and what problems you sought to solve?
Sure. Yeah. Pantry was my first foray into the startup world. I definitely played it on hard mode. Pantry is a hardware company. It's essentially a kiosk with an RFID tracking system. RFID is like an antenna and a little sticker that you put onto a product, and the antenna can see when the item is in the cooler. So the innovation was specifically for food vending and chips, soda. It's kind of fine through a vending machine. It doesn't need to look elegant or appetizing. It's okay. You kind of know what you're getting
It's
with
probably
it.
more for like a fresh salad or something like that.
Exactly,
Got
exactly.
it.
But when you have a salad that you want to connote freshness to, the opposite of the experience is like vending, right? So you need
You got to see it.
an experience that is like this beautiful glass door kiosk with unobstructed shelves and really beautiful merchandising where you could kind of like place it in a way where somebody could look inside the package and even give somebody an opportunity to open the door and like take it out and look inside it and read the ingredients, put it back if they don't want it. Food is so much about trust, right? And this solution, Pantry, it was a very innovative technology that can track items that went in and out of a glass door cooler like that, such that you can have that kind of incredible vending experience where you're not really relying on trust because you swipe your credit card
Hmm.
and that unlocks the door. Otherwise, you can't open the door. So we
Right.
have your credit card number. We have essentially your identity. There's a camera on the panel on it. So, so we kind of see you, we see what you're doing. So it's not really based on trust. So you take it out and it charges your credit card for what was taken out of the
Unless you put it
cooler
back in
using
and
this.
then it
You
reverses the
put it back
charge.
in and it goes back into inventory. Yeah,
Got it.
yeah, yeah. And we had essentially like a distribution problem where this thing made so much sense, but selling it one at a time was just like crazy. It just wasn't going to work. We were never going to hit like millions of dollars, raise that
Hmm.
next round of money, all of that. You could build a decent lifestyle business probably like one at a time. So you really need to go fast. You need to like, acquire multiple locations in one fell swoop. You need to do not even like 10, 15, but you really want to do like 100 at a time if you want to get pretty big.
Yeah.
So we had this one customer called Bite Foods. It's actually still around. And spoiler alert, they ended up buying Pantry. And they grew super fast. And they used our technology, Pantry, as their core go-to-market differentiator. And they were able to offer fresh food versus the competitors who were just doing like, you know, dry
Here's your
goods,
dried
basically
chips. Here's, your can of
beef
Coke or something like
jerky.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, and it was like we'll do that too, but we're also gonna have a cooler that can do sandwiches and salads and don't microwavable meals. So we were talking to them about what can we do together. They were over 50% of our revenue. So that was like another weird dynamic that we had to deal with. So Byte themselves were kind of like a startup. They thought of themselves kind of as a startup, and they were themselves also trying to raise money. You know what I mean? So it was a weird dynamic situation that we had
I'm
to
just giving you this
navigate.
picture of like the small fish getting eaten by a medium fish, getting eaten by a bigger fish.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah,
like that's what was going on from a fundraising point of view.
totally, totally. But in that we found out very quickly who the small fish was and we were the small fish and who the big fish was. But like when you're first starting this process, hey, we're the big fish, you know what I mean? And then you kind of find out the hard way that you're really not. So at least you try to be the big fish at least for a while, and then you're posturing that you're the big fish. Nobody really knows. So we ended up figuring out that our best exit opportunity is actually with Byte Foods. They have they have more access to capital. Like, let's say we could raise money, a couple $1 million, low valuation. Okay, that's something. Let's say they could raise $10 million at a great valuation. Okay, now there's like something there. We actually had like some outstanding debt as well, revolver that we took out with SVB. We had enough money to pay it back, but they were like willing to cover it and have some money on the table and give us equity into the combined company. And it was like, hey, that's not bad. That's not a bad option for us. So yeah, that's basically where we kind of all netted out. Our investors kind of netted out on that. I wasn't the CEO, but our CEO and the co-founders, I was one of the co-founders. We all sort of mutually agreed this is the best option for us.
Yeah. What I love about this is you mentioned this was a small exit, but like an exit is an exit. And I'm sure that there are things that you learned through the process that shaped how you approached building Passport, right? And so can you just talk about what were some of the lessons that you learned going through the due diligence process, going through the exit process where you're like, okay, I've figured this out and now I'm going to do things differently going forward.
Yeah, for sure. I learned all about leverage, and all the different ways that you can be leveraged and you can leverage, obviously from business standpoints. Not talking about the show Billions here,
Yeah.
but from a business standpoint, you learn very quickly. Hey, we have a lot of leverage over this company that has been built on our technology. You know, we have a ton of leverage. They're 51% of our revenue. We're 100% of their revenue. We
Mhm.
have a ton of leverage. You learn where to have leverage, where and how to communicate that leverage, all of that. So that was really, a good learning. And Seinfeld has a great there's a great episode about that. It's about having hand, you know,
Mhm.
um, in a relationship. This is George with his girlfriend about losing control in a relationship, having hand in a relationship. So very true in business as well. You always want to have hand, the upper hand. That's
Yeah.
that's what the reference is, and you always want to have hand. And you learn how to position yourself and try not to put yourself in a position where you don't have that. So
So
that's
let's go
that's
deeper there because I think that's really
yeah.
interesting. Is there what are the different types of leverage that you see? Because yes, obviously, if someone is a big customer of mine, I'm a big customer of theirs. Like that's one part of leverage, but there's other elements as well. What are some of those things that you look at that as you're thinking about building Passport, you want to make sure like, hey, we have these partnerships, we have this access to capital, we have these sorts of this data, right? This know-how. Or what are those leverage points?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think taking a step back, it's important to understand the stakeholders and what they care about. And that's where you could really understand what leverage you have. If you don't understand that, you can think that there's leverage over something that there isn't, you know. Um, some people don't care about an exit. Some people don't care about an exit. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to give them a ton of money and they're gonna have an exit, and they're going to be happy, and I have that leverage that I have this ability to give them something. They don't want that. They don't want that at all. They want to keep doing what they're doing. They're happy with what they're doing. Who doesn't want some extra money? But it's not like they're not looking to get out. They're
Yeah.
actually looking to double down. So that's not leverage. It's the opposite of leverage. You're misattuned to what the person is looking for. So I think
It's kind of the akin of saying like, here is this massive banana split that I can give you. Oh, you're lactose intolerant. Never mind.
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. That's almost anti-leverage.
Yeah.
You're pushing somebody away, right? Um, and so that's just like, and everybody has like different motivations and different pressure points. And taking like a really objective, not like passing judgment on any of those things. I don't think that there's anything virtuous or not virtuous about wanting to sell or not sell, or really any way you want to run your business. It's nothing wrong with whatever your approach is. But on the other side of the table, you just have to understand that and play to that. And then the reverse of that is a lot of people play games with what they want and with what they need. I think that's also like a naive thing that I approached business and even transactional things that way, where I would hide what's important to me. I would hide what I'm looking for because I thought that's going to give them leverage. They're going to know what I want, and that way they're going to be able to leverage it. There might be a kernel of truth to something like that, but I think that it's much stronger and more important to be very transparent about what you're looking for, because ultimately, like, help them help you. Most of the time, they won't even know that this is something that you're looking for, so they won't bring it up and they won't solve for it. So I think you actually end up losing more than you win. So I think it is kind of good to just be super transparent and like let somebody know what your weaknesses are. Um, you know, because most often than not, they're going to work towards getting you that thing that you're looking for, at the expense of other things. So just that playing that game, I don't think it's worth it. So I don't really do that anymore. I'm very transparent about what I'm looking for, what's important to me to Passport, and working with somebody on getting us there. So like, let them have this leverage over me. It's kind of a positive thing. I want them to know that they can help solve my problems, and then they'll get something that they're looking for. And hopefully they're open and transparent with me about what they're looking for. And, yeah, something good could come out of it faster.
Yeah, it definitely reminds me of how I've approached negotiations with factories, for example. Is you're both at the table for a reason, right? You think that this is going to be a beneficial relationship, and I agree with you. I think playing these games of, well, I'm not going to know that I actually want this because I'm going to take this away, like that's exhausting. Who has time for that anymore? And
Totally.
in most cases, you're not dealing with hundreds of billions of dollars where, a quarter of a percent could actually be a lot of money. In most cases, they're very, very straightforward deals or transactions, in the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, where you're just saying, hey, I like, here are the assets that we have that we think are valuable to you. This is the outcome that I want, and now like let's go forward and do that. Because I was talking with somebody just last week who was talking with a company that was going through the due diligence process with a large CPG company, and they had what they thought was a very unique, novel approach. But they didn't have any IP around it, right? They didn't have the underlying technology. They were white labeling it, but they had brought something from another country into this country, and were doing very well from that. And this large CPG company said, you know what, that's nice. Even though your brand is doing a lot, growing really fast, massive distribution, we think we could grow it. Because you don't have underlying technology, we're not interested in it. And it was one of those things where it was a very quick conversation. And yeah, it ended, and it would have been nice to have another bidder or those sorts of things. But in the end, it was the best for both parties because if you know that something is not going to work, don't waste people's time and just move forward. And so I think that that's it definitely resonates with me in terms of making sure that you are upfront with what you want, what you have to have, what you can live with, and then what doesn't matter to you.
Totally.
Cool. So let's kind of take that and move it less from the pantry exit, which I would say is your training wheels for how to go through this process. And now you were just recently on the other side, and let's talk about the brand access acquisition. How did the team first approach this build versus buy decision that you were making? Because you had said that you were starting to do this yourself, and then this company became available. What was that calculus like? When did you go from, we're just going to do it ourselves to actually, let's just partner with these guys?
Yeah. So I think if you have the resources, which thankfully we do, I think you should build. And if you decide to buy, great, buy. But you might decide not to buy, and great, you've been building all along. So I don't think you should ever make the decision to just go buy, because again, back to the leverage point, you don't want to be in a position where you have to do a deal. You're year one, you haven't found somebody, the one that you wanted fell through after 6 months. So you just lost on a mission critical product 6 months, and it might take another 6 months. And guess what? It still might not happen in 6 months. And then you start getting desperate, and you're gonna offer more money than you really should be, and you're gonna do a bad deal for yourself because you feel like you have to, or you're gonna fall behind. That's crazy. That's crazy. You can't put yourself in that position. So I think that it's build and or buy, but it's never buy. That's my philosophy on M&A and all of this. So for us, we saw this wave. We have to solve it. We start to build. We actually did build it for one customer. And we were very transparent with this customer. It's one of our bigger accounts. They wanted to do in-country fulfillment in UK. And we built it with them. We had some expertise with other different tangential things, but a lot of things were net new. We built it for them. They had a very successful launch. It went great. And I was like somewhere in the middle of, trying to buy brand access at the same time. And then that was a tough one, If this was like even before we built it, then it would have been more no-brainer, I'd say. But we just built it. We know how to do it. We could probably Control C, Control V into EU, Australia, Canada, so forth, But then for this company, they were special. They were really special. They weren't just like, we're just buying some capabilities, and great, real build versus buy. How long would it take us? Whatever. But these guys were special. So these guys, one, they were operating longer than we have been operating Passport, just a regular business. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're really one of the OGs in cross-border e-commerce, and especially in this pinpoint strike exactly what we're looking for here. They're just really, really early. If there's any fault for them, it's that you guys should have waited 8 years, and
They
that
started paddling
wave.
before the wave came.
Yeah. They were a little bit early, They had double-digit customers, but they don't have like hundreds of customers. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There weren't even hundreds of customers to have. So I don't even know what market share they have, but it's probably very big. I don't know who else does this. They're like the only name that came up. So, they very well might have like 75% market share in this like new budding, in-country enablement ecosystem. So anyway, so they were special. They really knew how this stuff works, how to do it. So, that was like, you kind of find out the hard way about certain things. Like 2 years down the road, you get some like angry letter from some government entity and you're like, oh, I didn't even know we weren't in compliance, So these guys would have seen it all because they've been at it for 8 years, right? So that they have some incredible customers. These guys work with the hosts of the Operators podcast, Hexclad and Ridge. And I thought, these aren't just regular customers that they have that, they'll be like good reference points. These guys have the owners are like tastemakers in this industry, and they run this podcast where they promote different solutions. And this is one of the solutions that they love. Let me tell you something, Aaron. So as part of this acquisition process, we diligenced by calling literally every single one of Brain Access's accounts. Okay. And I personally, me or our president, Tom Griffin, personally took every single one of those calls and asked, like, are you happy with the solution? Not playing games here. Are you happy with the solution? And if you say no, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to do this deal, but it means that I might renegotiate, and every single one of those accounts said they love it and it works great. And I ask questions in a way that I'm trying to get like the truth. You know what I mean? I'm just kidding. Like, I think if like one customer was like, yeah, it's not quite working for me, I don't think that that's reason to renegotiate something. Maybe if it's their biggest account. But really, I was very much paying attention to the Ridge and to the Hexclad diligence calls, just because, they're public. These guys are going to talk about it on their podcast. So if they don't like it, it might actually be like a counter signal, right? And these guys had the nicest things to say, and they talked about Brain Access as like a core part of their operations, and they couldn't have done it without them. Really, that's what I wanted to hear, and that, that to me, it really sealed the deal. We had an LOI, so I was already kind of convinced, but hearing that, I was like, oh my God, oh shit, I'm like onto something really big here.
Let me do this deal now before other people find out.
I
Did you
know, I know,
did you find
I
any
know.
like any I guess people internally who had built your solution kind of feel let down a little bit that they couldn't just Control C, Control V everywhere? And we brought this to the team. And I'm reminded, my wife used to work on Breyer's ice cream, and at the time, Talenti was just eating their lunch from a market share point of view. And she talked to me about how she had put together this whole strategy, and she was preparing a deck to give to their VP about how Breyer's was going to crush Talenti. And about an hour before she was going to give that presentation, Unilever announced that they had acquired Talenti. And so it was one of these things where it's like, well, I just spent how many months working on all this, know that business really well, but like, man, a heads up would have been nice. Did you encounter anything else like that?
You know, I think that the team was so pumped about what this means for us in acquisitions, in the acquisition, what it means for our expansion, for our credibility, just like everything, that whatever disappointment they had about being the ones to do this specific thing, it like very quickly faded.
Mm.
Um, Frankly speaking, like 3 months before we finalized the deal, I kind of put the kibosh on moving any of this other stuff forward. I was like, let's. I was my message to the team was to that I was working on it was like, let's get really good at this UK one. Let's tighten the screws on it. Let's not get distracted by other countries. They didn't know what I knew, which is like, I'm gonna solve this problem like this. Just give me 3 months. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And if it doesn't happen, okay, fine. We're 3 months behind. We have tightened the screws on UK. You know what I mean? So
Well, it comes back to that build or buy versus just build, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, totally.
that's good. So I kind of want to talk about, you went through the sale process, you went through the buy process, and I would say that the hardest part, well, the first hardest thing you can do is start a business. I think the second hardest thing you can do is try to integrate an acquisition. And you've been on one side where you sold a business, stayed on as an advisor, and I'm sure helped kind of integrate. And now you're actively looking at this with brand access and figuring out how do you merge everything together. What are some things that you've seen that make or break an acquisition or an integration?
Yeah, for sure. So this is actually our second deal at at Passport.
Okay.
We acquired an asset-based international shipping consolidator called Access Worldwide.
That's right.
Yeah, about 3 years ago. And the CEO of that company, of Access Worldwide, Adam Langston, he became our chief commercial officer, and kind of like our head of supply chain, and helped build out all the nodes and all of that for us. He's still with us. He's doing great. In fact, everybody from that team, several years in, is still with us. Not true. One person is gone, but pretty much everybody else. And it's been a huge success for us. So I gained that credibility with my investors and my team, to do this deal. So the third one I think is going to be easier to convince anybody, if
Sure.
this one goes well, So, the jury's still out. I think we need to still execute. We just did this. But Access Worldwide, I think, is like far and away a success. So, when we were doing that, that was my first deal. And I myself didn't really know how to answer that question, but I was asking that question. I was asked that question by my board, by colleagues who care about the company, and myself, of course, and I ended up engaging with some advisors. So either a friend who works for a corp dev team at like Salesforce, or really like a consultant who took us on as like a small client just to kind of give us some pointers, help set things up for us. And the consistent advice was that there's a few different buckets that you have to keep your eye on, right? People, obviously people. Number one, people.
Yep.
Processes, okay? And technology. And if you could bucket really anything, like, oh, the accounting system is different. Okay, that's process, that's technology, and that's people. So you could kind of like bucket what happens across those three different things, right? And there's some things that you gotta gear up for, so it's a orderly, thoughtful transition. And each one of those things is going to have its own narrative, its own stakeholders, its own answer. No one size fits all. No like blanket answer. You're going to do everything the Passport way. Or no, we got to ask them how they do things and be really,
Yeah.
thoughtful and work collaboratively. Like sometimes, no, you got to tell them this is how we're going to do it.
Yep.
It doesn't matter what your like feedback is. This is just how we're going to do it for, for some fundamental reasons. And there's some things where it really has to be collaboration. We might end up doing it your way. We might end up doing it our way, right? So there's no one size fits all. And then I'd say the most important thing is first impressions matter. So that first week is like, it's a completely different thing that what happens afterwards. You got to really plan for that first week. Got to show a lot of love, a lot of care, a lot of thoughtfulness. Nobody wants to start their first day with the choir like nothing works, all the systems are confusing. Like how does
Sucks.
I'm a
Yeah.
little. My first paycheck was late. You know what I mean? Like, like my insurance is a little bit confusing. You want to have answers for everything. Everybody wants to know who they're reporting to, how it's going to work. Like, so we put together detailed FAQs. We had
Mm.
session upon session. We had a buddy program where somebody from Passport, connected with somebody from Access Worldwide, and we did that with Brain Access. So, like, I personally reached out to everybody, had a one-on-one. Um, Access Worldwide was based in Atlanta. I spent like weeks in Atlanta physically being there, having lunch with people. So that I would say, we played that really well. We basically reused a lot of the same playbook and even collateral like FAQ. We like deleted out Access Worldwide, typed in Brain Access. You know what I mean? A
You
lot
got
of the same things.
your control C, control V part on that end, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So, again, I think the third one's going to be even easier, but Brain Access was like, we kind of knew what to do,
Yeah, a
make
lot
it a
of that
success.
resonates with me. I've been around some very bad acquisitions, and I've been around some very good acquisitions. And what you're saying resonates with me in what I've seen as kind of like the playbook. And the first thing that you just illustrated very well is you have to get on the same team. And this is things where, is it a Microsoft shop or a Google shop? You got to solve that, right? What's the email domain? What are the benefits? And so, like, that's the first step is getting on the same team. The second piece is really starting to speak the same language. And so I'm sure that Passport had different acronyms for different things than brand access has, right? Or and so you've got to start to think through those things. Are you on the same calendar? There's some communication or translation piece that happens. And then what I found that the best acquisitions happen is there's intentional cross pollination. And
Mm,
so you look to say, okay, from a leadership point of view, who can we help swap and where can we make
mm,
sure that there's not an us versus them, even if there's, I'm sure the team's still heavily based in Atlanta versus San Francisco, but there's pieces there. And then you kind of take some time, could be years at that point, where you're finding ways for junior employees to apply for roles with the acquirer and vice versa. But the big thing that I kind of come back to is that for an acquisition to really land and to do well, you have to score a win together.
mm,
And so there's got to be something new that you're doing,
mm,
new that either side couldn't have done on their own. And you
mm,
say, that's the mountain that we're going to go climb.
mm,
It's a year, 2 years out. Let's go do it. Because
mm,
if you have that central goal and you're working on it, by the time you reach it, you've kind of
mm,
melted away all of these other
mm,
options, right? Or
mm,
these other divisions that were there. And you've accomplished something that's very, very unique and interesting that gets you the value of that acquisition. And at
mm,
that point, then you can start looking at, consolidation and, having like the same office or time zones, things like that. But it's really identifying what this key win is going to be and just saying whether it's a revenue piece or a number of countries
mm,
or, customer penetration or things, something that, in the case of brand access, you weren't able to do on your own. And
mm.
then on Passport, you weren't able to do it. What can you do together? And like, let's marshal all these resources toward that. And once that happens, the acquisition can be considered complete in my mind.
Mm, mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah. Um, so as you think through how you're integrating these businesses and you've got this playbook that works. What if you were that advisor and you were talking to a founder who wanted to sell their company? What could they be doing to make their company easier to integrate, right? Easier to digest, so to speak.
Yeah, I think there's an M&A adage. Companies get bought, they don't get sold. And I think it comes down to an earlier thing that we talked about, identifying who the stakeholders are. Product market fit. It's not product fit, it's product market fit.
Mm.
So you need to identify who you think can acquire you. Thinking about that in great specificity with not only the company, but also the division, and even going so far as to thinking, who's my champion? And it's not my champion is the corporate dev person because we, on paper look like we fit and they need to do deals. No, it needs to be like a product champion or a service champion. The division matters and all of that, especially if we're talking about big companies like Google and Amazon, which are very acquisitive, so those are really great
Yeah.
options. But like, what exactly are we talking about? AWS for Amazon? Are we talking about the Prime team? Right? The AI team, the self-driving team. I don't know. There's a lot of different divisions at Amazon, and having a narrative that can get validated by actual people at that company, not necessarily the like head of the group, but just like taking out somebody relatively junior or middle manager for a coffee and understanding that.
Is kind of what you're getting at, that you reverse engineer the exit that you want with potentially people you want. And it's almost like if I knew that I wanted to sell to Walmart, right?
Yeah.
That I'd identify the group, I'd network with that person honestly, but then really kind of use their acquisition criteria as the criteria for how I should be building the business. If they say we really emphasize having solid tech, maybe that's where you invest more. If it's more, we want to see scale, we want to see, is that kind of what you're getting at? Is just
Yeah,
really being
exactly
specific
right.
about reverse engineering into it?
Exactly right. Exactly right. So there was this
Yeah.
point that you probably recall, like maybe 7 years ago when Walmart started to acquire D2C brands,
Yep.
right? Um, and if you're a D2C brand that has a unique offering and you're successful on the Walmart store, you can kind of do that math. Why not me? At least give it a crack if
Yeah.
you're interested in being acquired. Target was doing D2C acquisitions. Procter and Gamble, they were doing D2C acquisitions. They bought Native, etc. And you can do that math, and you as a D2C brand can recognize that there's a moment in time here. These deals are happening. Um, Unilever, they're probably, let me write them down. Let me see what category am I in? Oh, I'm in, personal hygiene. Okay, so that's this theme. That's who these people are in LinkedIn. And that's really it. Like, thinking outside the box, it's a distraction, you know?
Yeah.
You got to look where there's already a pattern of deals happening. It's hard to be that very first one. It's already hard to sell when you're like the fifth one for Procter and Gamble. It's still really hard. It's still like the odds are slim, and you really have to be top tier. But imagine being not the fifth one in a row, but the first one that they're buying. What's that about? That's like a total different narrative that they have, and you have to be privy to it. That's really luck.
You're creating the
So
market, so to speak, of really why you. Yeah.
yeah, so you really want to be like the second or third one in a row. That's usually when something can happen in somebody who has an appetite for
I
that
think so
kind of
much of
thing.
this too is just like the exit window that the acquirer has. You may be the right fit, the right type of company, but if they're not buying, right, because
Yeah,
there's a CEO change or their business is down, then it's kind of like, well, you're going to keep waiting, right? And that's why it's
totally,
so important that you're always profitable and you've got the ability to wait as a, compared to what you said, where you in a position where you have to sell.
totally,
So,
totally.
Alex, I know we're coming up on time here. Two questions I want to ask you is that we ask everybody. So the first one is, what is the best example of a moat that you've seen a business build?
So, I used to work at Facebook. I don't know if you know that, Aaron. I used to work at Facebook. And frankly speaking, there is no better moat than a network effect,
Mm,
a multi-sided network effect, where we had this rule at Facebook: when you hit 40 friends, you're going to be a lifer. And the reason being is, you have 5 friends, you might not come back. There's not that much content. It's not that interesting. Once you hit 40, it's really interesting, and those social pressures of coming back make you come back, and the more you come back, you might be somebody's 40th friend, and it creates this like incredible cycle. So any business that can create a social network, a moat, a community, is a tangent of that, that's maybe more
yep,
relevant for the e-commerce industry. No better moat.
got it. And I love that too. And I feel like everybody's trying to start communities these days exactly for that. That could be a hard thing to do. If you had to start today, how would you go about building a business worth buying?
We live in a very interesting time period with AI. So I think, first of all, I would start there. I would see what things are the way they are now, and what does AI fundamentally change? Because, that point that we were talking about earlier, incumbents, they're just structurally not able to address new technologies and new changes like regulatory issues as fast as a startup can. So you need a competitive advantage. You need something that's fundamentally, you can in theory win. It's still incredibly difficult, but at least on paper you want to be able to like tell yourself that what I have just couldn't have existed a year ago. That's why it doesn't exist. So I'm building
Mm,
it. So AI is a great place to start. Something that somebody wants to build. Again, I think you need to start with a buyer. You need to look at where companies are being bought. It's one thing if you're trying to sell for 1 billion. It's another thing if you're trying to sell for 5 million. There's some really cool micro acquisition sites out there right now, and going on that, filtering for what's selling for 1 to 5 million, kind of getting a pulse on that market and what's actually moving. So what's been on the market for 270 days versus like it goes up and then it sells within like 3 weeks. What is it? What is that business? Is it like a plumbing business? It could very well be that. Or is it a business, like D2C brands? Are they selling really hot? You could, if yes, in what category, in what revenue zone, and then matching it to AI. Can AI give me a competitive advantage in what your special founder market fit is? Like,
mm.
why are you the one to do it? What special skill or knowledge do you have that you're going to be the one that does this thing? even with the superpower of AI, why are you the one? And then coupling it with like, yeah, what's being bought, and then just try to fit it into that.
I love that. Founder market fit plus product market fit equals the exit. So
Yeah.
that's wonderful. Alex, this is great. If people want to learn more about Passport or connect with you, what's the right way to do that?
Website, passportglobal.com, or my email, alex@passportglobal.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I will see you soon and appreciate all you do.
You got it. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks for joining me on Build a Business Worth Buying, brought to you by ISBA Consulting. I hope today's conversation gave you real insights into scaling smarter, selling better, and thinking like a strategic operator. If you found value in this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's building their own sellable business. Until next time, remember, the real win isn't just building a business, it's building one worth buying.